So I'm going to do a segment here for you, which is the top 10 reasons why you should vote for and support Bernie Sanders over Elizabeth Warren in the Democratic primary. This is really an empirical question. This is really an objective question. There's not much room for, subjectivity. This isn't like picking your favorite flavor of bagel or something. It's not arbitrary. So we're going to get into that. Now, also, let me say, I have, for people who might have stumbled across this video who are actively supporting Elizabeth Warren at this moment, I got nothing against you. I got nothing against her. Again, I just want to lay it out in a very clear, digestible way because, in my opinion, as somebody who's been following politics for quite a long time, when you're picking a candidate, the three most important things, their proposed policies, so what do they want to do, their record, which is what have they done, also an under-discussed thing, which is massively important, their strategy. How will they go about getting said things implemented? And then obviously you could also throw in there a very basic thing like honesty. So number one, and a lot of people don't remember this, she voted for Ben Carson to be the head of Housing and Urban Development. Now, after a giant, gargantuan, legendary political backlash from everybody who was a supporter of hers, she flipped in the next round of votes. So the lesson we take away from this is either poor political instincts, where every now and then she wanders into a minefield, or, and I actually think this is a little more likely, her instincts aren't necessarily that bad, but it's so easy to talk her out of the position that she would originally come to, which is usually not that bad. Reason number two. One of these candidates wants to fully eliminate medical debt, $81 billion worth of it, which is all of it, and one of these candidates doesn't. Number three. One of them wants to eliminate all student loan debt. The other one doesn't. The other one has a plan to eliminate some student loan debt, but it ain't all of it. So that's another giant difference. And what you're going to see here is a trend of Elizabeth Warren doing what honestly was one of Obama's biggest flaws, which is concede up front a little bit. One of these candidates voted for Trump's incredibly bloated military budget, and one of them didn't. And just so everybody knows, this military budget was so gargantuan and so obnoxious. It had more money in it than Donald Trump was even asking for. One of these candidates has raised a tremendous amount of money from the military-industrial complex and done favors for them. Guess what, guys? Raytheon is headquartered in Massachusetts. So, there's been extensive reporting on how Elizabeth Warren has indeed done favors for Raytheon and the military-industrial complex. The other one has not. The other one has not raised money from them and not done any favors for them. The next, one of these candidates waffled on Medicare for all until very recently, and the other one never has.
When you say Medicare for all, do you mean, for example, the bill that you've co-signed onto in the Senate, or do you think it could also mean Medicare buy-in, et cetera?
So I support Medicare for all. I have for a very long time. And I believe that there are lots of ways to get there. So for example, even in the bill that I've co-sponsored with Bernie and others, it's got a 4-year period in it. It's got different ways that ramp in. It's got some groups that never get into it. For example, veterans will always have a separate healthcare system. There are a lot of different ways that people talk about it and have introduced into Congress. Some are actual bills. Some have just talked about it. We could start lowering the age. So you could do it rather than just saying how it is. We're going to build the ramp. You could build the ramp by saying 60 years old is the age for Medicare, 55, 50, or you could do it the other way. Everybody under 30 is covered, then everybody under 35, then everybody under 40. Different ways to move into the system. But there is one thing I would really like to underline here. First is the principle, and that is where we're aiming as Democrats, and that is that every single human being in this country is covered by healthcare at a price they can afford, that healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights. And I would like to contrast that with the Republican Party that's not having this conversation about the best ways to get there, but instead is still out there actively working to try to take away healthcare from tens of millions of Americans. So there are a lot of times I'm proud to be a Democrat, but when we're talking about healthcare, this is one of the biggest distinctions and something that would directly touch the lives of pretty much everybody in this country. And I like where the Democrats are on this. But at the end of the day, I know what the center is. And the center is that we have high quality access for every single person.
When one candidate waffles on Medicare for all and the other one never has, that tells me she's less likely to pursue it. But even beyond that, even if she does pursue it, it's not like she's going to waste a lot of political capital and really go to the mat to try to get it implemented. She's already signaled up front, I'm willing to give away the farm and go to a lesser bill, which she thinks might have a better chance of passing. Because, hey, all the Democrats are at the same position anyway, right? All these plans are pretty good anyway, right? No, they're not. Either the Bernie bill or the Jayapal bill, which are both different versions of Medicare for all single payer, and that's it. Those are the only ones that are really going to fundamentally change our healthcare system. One of these candidates is taking big money in the general. The other one is not.
Does this only apply in the primaries, or will you carry this over to the general election or any other election you'll have going forward?
So this is for primaries. Look, I do not believe in unilateral disarmament. We need to win. We need to win in 2020. And when we hit 2020, and we're in a race against Donald Trump, when we're in a race for control of the Senate and control of the House and in control of the state houses and the governor's mansions, in all of those, the Republicans are going to be bringing a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of dark money, a lot of super PACs, all to the fight. We played with the same rules. And in that one, I say we got to be all in.
She unveiled this wonderful plan about, how big money's destroying our politics and corruption is a giant problem. And what she proposed was a very good bill. And what she took was a very good pledge. And she said, I'm not going to take any big money donors. But she said, but I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. So after I'm done not taking big money in the primary, when I get to the general election, I'm going to take big money. Now, let me explain why this is a deal breaker. Because the dynamic that she admits exists is, that's corruption. The influence of big money in politics and corporate money and billionaire money, that's all corruption. Because that's the corporations and the billionaires and the rich folks buying influence, getting politicians to do their bidding because they've given them campaign contributions. So when they make a phone call, the politicians are much more likely to listen and implement the agenda of the rich donors as opposed to the people. She acknowledges that dynamic exists. But she says, in the general, I'm going to partake in it. But if you admit that dynamic exists, it doesn't just magically go away in a general election. So it's like a next level embarrassing of her to make this argument because she's trying to do some weird middle ground to try to say, the left loves me, but also let me virtue signal to the centrists to say, I'm a serious candidate and I'm willing to play by the rules that exist already. So she's trying to do both things at once, but she ends up making herself look ridiculous because you already agreed to the premise that the left has argued all along, which is that big money is a corrupting influence, except all you're saying is, I'm going to take it in the general, but just trust me that it won't affect me in the same way it affects others. But if you agree the dynamic is there, you're not magically above it. And it doesn't magically change in the general because you want it to or because you want to beat Trump. Maybe the way to beat Trump is to be principled. Maybe the way to beat Trump is to actually believe in this left-wing vision and argue for this left-wing vision, and you don't deviate or run to the center or do any goofy things like go back on your principles in order to try to get that outcome. She transferred $10.4 million of the big money she raised a couple years ago into her presidential campaign. Now, she had already made the announcement, I'm not taking any big money in this primary election. But she already raised all the big money in 2018 for 2020 and then just transferred the money. So apparently there are a lot of big donors behind the scenes who are like, wow, you're really full of it. That is an incredibly sleazy trick. And then the next one is, she didn't endorse Bernie in 2016. When on paper, ideologically, she agrees a lot more with Bernie Sanders than Hillary Clinton, she didn't endorse Bernie. So what does that tell you? It tells you there are deeper layers of analysis going on where she's kind of embodying that Hillary Clinton line of, I have a public position and a private position. She's willing to play Machiavellian politics. What you see is not what you get. And then why are we supposed to trust you? Here are the final things, and I think this is really important. This might be the most important, okay? Elizabeth Warren fully embraces the language of bipartisanship as opposed to class struggle. And she also has said stuff, again, on TYT, very damning interview she's done there. She said to Cenk one time, quote, "Allow me to make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin." When Elizabeth Warren says, "Allow me to make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin," do you think she's going to actively work to primary Joe Manchin? Do you think she's going to know how to apply political pressure to him to either force him to vote for Medicare for all or actively use the bully pulpit against him to get him out of there, and then whoever replaces him can get Medicare for all and vote for Medicare for all? Do you think she's going to do that? The answer, it's not even a question. The answer is 100% absolutely no. Joe Manchin will be able to vote however he wants to vote. He can block Elizabeth Warren's entire left-wing agenda, and she's not going to do anything about it. Guys, we had a president like that. We already had a president like that. And you know what? We got tweaks around the edges. That's the kind of change we got. We didn't get, ironically, she's using this phrase, big structural change. We got minor little tweaks around the edges, which made the system continue to rot, which then led to the rise of a fake populist like Trump. So the only way you're going to advance really any giant, bold, left-wing progressive ideas is to have somebody in there totally unapologetic, willing to use the bully pulpit, willing to throw around his weight, willing to get people engaged, willing to call out members of his own party. So you need somebody who's just a bull in a china shop and who's not, especially up front, given an inch on any of our goals. That candidate's just not Elizabeth Warren. It's just not. Not even close. That candidate's Bernie Sanders.